we don't have a confidence issue. We have a narrative issue. We have an issue around storytelling, around who in the media is dictating what stories about money, finance, and business that women are seeing. And a lot of the times it's none. And if it does exist, it's very negative, right? So as a journalist and as someone who saw the inside of newsrooms and who oftentimes was the only woman, person of color, person under the age of 40 in my newsrooms, I really saw the direct result and reason for why women are fed such false narratives around money, finance, and business. And it's because our stories are predetermined to be shelved for the diversity section of a paper.
Welcome to Knowing Me, Knowing You, the podcast for the future of wealth management. Thanks for being here. I'm Marla Sofer. Money is a tool. It empowers people. Let's dive into how technology is personalizing advice, strengthening connections, and creating lasting impact. If you're an advisor looking to differentiate, a fintech leader shaping the next wave, or a client ready to take control of your financial future, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome to the Knowing Me, Knowing You podcast, the Know Me podcast where we explore the art and science of discovery to build meaningful connections in financial planning. Nicole Casperson is a trailblazing journalist, author, and the founder of Fintech is Femme, a transformative media company dedicated to building a more equitable and inclusive fintech industry. Her work has been a game changer, highlighting the powerful stories of women reshaping the financial landscape. Nicole's impact doesn't stop there. She's the author of the acclaimed book, Fintech Feminists, which showcases inspiring stories of women solving some of the world's most pressing challenges in finance and technology. The book features thought leaders like Sally Krawcheck of Ellevest, shining a light on how these innovators are redefining the future. She's also the founder of the Fintech is Femme Leadership Summit, coming up soon, April 23rd in New York, with accolades like being named one of New York City Fintech Women's top inspiring females in fintech and a finalist for the Fintech Nexus DEI Trailblazer Award. Nicole is a champion for diversity and inclusion. She's a trusted educator. She's teaching financial management at Parsons School of Design. She's a contributor to Forbes, where she explores the intersection of gender equity, finance, and technology. I'm super excited to dive into her journey and discuss the evolution of Fintech is Femme and hear about her vision for a more inclusive future in fintech. Nicole, welcome to the Knowing Me, Knowing You podcast.
Oh, well, thank you, Marla. And thank you for such a lovely welcome. So excited to be here.
Likewise, I'm very excited that you are giving me just a little bit of your time. So we always start out with, what is exciting to you about the moment that we are in right now?
Wow. What a loaded question for this current moment that we're in.
We try to start on a positive end. Like, let's start optimistic. What's exciting?
Always,
what is the good stuff?
I'm ultimately an optimist, which is how I'm an entrepreneur, so are you. So we're obviously optimists. I think that what's so incredible about the moment that we're in right now is that it can feel incredibly easy to be very pessimistic, to kind of sit on the sidelines, to not pay attention. But there's nothing more powerful right now than to resist that urge, right? And to find yourself focused on building. I know that for me, that's kind of my big theme for this year, is to really show how showing up, being consistent, building and doubling down on your set of beliefs and the purpose that you have for why it is you're doing what you're doing. That to me is what this moment in time is giving me just the rocket fuel to continue doing. So that's where we're at.
I love that so much. And yeah,
positive
side. And we as entrepreneurs, I think, have to be optimistic and try to build the future that we want to see. And and when it's aligned with purpose, we are just fueled to break through all of those walls and barriers and ebbs and flows that happen in the world around us. So your work on Fintech is Femme really emphasizes the importance of empowering women in fintech. And you do such a good job of amplifying them and supporting them and giving them your very, very well developed over years platform. Why do you think that this is so important and critical to the future of finance?
Yes. Well, if there's something that I fundamentally address in my book and pretty early on, it's that financial services has really done a disservice and one could call it almost a failure, right? To properly serve 50% of our population, right? At the end of the day, women are not a niche. They're not a monolith. They're half of the workforce. They're half of the population. They are consistently in need of financial services that better serves them, especially as women continue to really crush it, right? At the end of the day, a lot of the larger narrative around kind of keeping women in their place, if you will, is clearly happening. Like, they have to attack us because we're clearly gaining more power, right? Obviously, that can be seen in other ways. But at the end of the day, women are owning more homes. We're generating more wealth. We're becoming entrepreneurs faster. We're building and having more college degrees, and all of the stats out there that really clearly show that women are crushing it. And to have a financial services system not properly serve us is just money left on the table, right? That's a $700 billion opportunity just not being captured. Obviously, with fintech, and that's kind of the power of fintech that I write about, is we're seeing that capture happen more and more. That only happens though if women are the ones leading the industries and the spaces in financial services, in fintech, because you're not going to be able to properly serve a demographic if no one in that demographic is building the product that for the demographic you claim to serve. Anyways, so that's essentially why it's so important right now, not only obviously for the bottom line, like obviously investing in women and generating more wealth and more financial services for women is clearly the best thing to do for business, but it also is the right thing to do. So
do you mind if I'm going to go off script a little bit? And I know I've heard your story a little bit, and I really appreciate where you come from. So you came up to these conclusions that the industry has failed women, that there is an underlying kind of an undercurrent that is keeping women out of these positions of power, and that tech is part of the antidote. It's part of the solution. I'm using my own words to recap what you just said. So my next question is really, tell me a little bit how you got to that. And I'll tell you, kind of just listening to you speak, it's refreshing because having come from, I've spent over 20 years in the industry, and like deep in the guts of how it operates, both from private banking at JP Morgan, at BlackRock, at some of the best companies. And I have the same conclusion in a lot of ways. And so you came at it from a very different perspective. Tell me a little bit about what brought you to these beliefs.
Yeah. Well, honestly, it's through years and years of interviewing incredibly powerful, successful, influential, and also just honest and vulnerable women in the industry. I'm lucky to be a journalist at a time when so many women are open to being outspoken, right? Especially if you have the privilege to do so and to feel like you can be outspoken and still remain safe. The fact that those women are open to sharing their personal journeys with me, sharing with me, hey, you know what? I saw the broken pieces of Wall Street, or I saw the broken pieces of the financial services industry, and that radicalized me to be an entrepreneur and to build for that gap that I saw, that unique gap, right? Because all of them, right? I have 40 different profiles in my book. They all are addressing different things and different needs. And some of them are addressing similar things, but doing it in different ways. I don't know anything that's more powerful than changing the way that money moves, than changing capital markets, than changing the way that different demographics invest or learn about money. There's truly nothing more powerful than sitting at the intersection of the two most powerful business sectors on the planet, finance and technology. And so I came to the conclusion of women being the ones to really reinforce innovation way of two ways, right? Like, one is history. At the end of the day, women are the ones who built the rails of the financial services system to begin with, right? Your first coder in history is a woman, Ada Lovelace. You know, the woman who invented Cobble, which is the rails that fintech and banks run on today, is Grace Hopper. The first Black woman to own and operate a bank that still exists today, one of the longest running banks, is a Black woman named Maggie Walker. For me, as women, our ancestors are the ones that created this space. How could we not continue to build on the legacy that they have set for us? And because those women did what they did, you can even say a Muriel Siebert, right? Like, going a little bit more ahead in the timeline, and the New York Stock Exchange, right? Like, for those women to open those doors and for us to basically walk through them and keep opening new ones for others, that's innovation. fruition. That's how you change a system. That's how you create new systems and patterns. If you don't like what you're seeing in the world right now, then that's women open doors for us to walk right through them and keep going. So that's one conclusion. And then you see that come to fruition with the women today. A lot of the more, let's say, modern entrepreneurs and CEOs who I wrote about in my book too, is them picking up the baton and saying, I'm going to tackle student debt. And I'm in with fintech and a way for that to be more approachable and inclusive and not completely ruin people's lives, right? With mass amounts of debt. I'm going to find a way to tackle financial planning for women. I'm going to find a way to make sure that moms and caregivers are given the economic opportunity that they deserve. It's talking to people and interviewing and seeing that it exists and making sure that I use my platform so that more women can see that these stories exist.
Yeah. So a couple of follow-up questions on that. Number one is I love it. I love that you are really pulling out these conclusions from insiders who have been there and who've seen it, and also looking at the history. And I would agree that a lot of us empowering the change we want to see is opening doors. And I would also add, and what we're seeing today in the world that we live in is when they harness the control of their own money. So women are coming into money, and when they then power where that money is going, that we'll see the change. So I have a follow-up question here, because you did say before, look, it's a $700 billion opportunity. It's 50% of the population. It is, frankly, right now, over the last decade, it's a much more educated part of the population. It's a part of the population that is growing in their corporate roles much faster, that is finding the guts to kind of go out and be entrepreneurs. So with all of these changes, we're coming into this massive intergenerational transfer of wealth. What is inhibiting our empowerment? And I've got my own take kind of coming from the inside, but I'm curious, like, how do you synthesize everything that you've learned in these interviews and what you've seen through your platform?
Yeah. So one thing that I'll make sure to just debunk is the confidence issue. I think that's usually the response that people would go with is, oh, women just have a confidence issue. I find that to be not true. I think that I have interviewed and met with enough women who are clearly very confident and in who they are and what they do and in their business models. And in fact, it's that confidence that pushed them to defy the odds. We don't have a confidence issue. We have a narrative issue. We have an issue around storytelling, around who in the media is dictating what stories about money, finance, and business that women are seeing. And a lot of the times it's none. And if it does exist, it's very negative, right? So as a journalist and as someone who saw the inside of newsrooms and who oftentimes was the only woman, person of color, person under the age of 40 in my newsrooms, I really saw the direct result and reason for why women are fed such false narratives around money, finance, and business. And it's because our stories are predetermined to be shelved for the diversity section of a paper or saved for Women's History Month, as if our stories aren't suitable for front page news every single day, day in and day out, just like anyone else's would be, right? Like, I'm sorry, was there some sort of special like white dude space of the magazine? There's not. So like women stories and the businesses that they're building and the way that they do business is not only more profitable and more sustainable, and they do more with less money, and they build companies where they don't have to be totally awash with cash yet somehow lay off 5% of their workforce, whatever that is. Women aren't doing that. So we should be following their business model more to create the diversity and create the innovation that it takes to fundamentally change a system, to move our economy and our society forward. Anyways, that's kind of how I got there.
I love it. And the storytelling and the modeling is so important. And as a mom of a daughter and a son, that modeling, that storytelling, that they see that it's possible and they recognize that this is not odd. This is not something that is strange. That is what kind of starts to like eat away at the biases that are so deeply ingrained everywhere else.
Well, and you can even think of this when you think of your past as being a woman growing up in America.
I'm still a woman, but right, I was one.
a young one once, right? In our youthful times. Like, yes. Thinking about the past, and honestly, we know like our confidence is there, right? Like we know on the playground or whatever it is we're doing, that we know how to follow our intuition. We know what to do next. We know how to be confident in ourselves and our beliefs and our purposes and what we want to do. But somewhere along the way, the narratives and the stories and the media and the social media and the everything clouds that judgment. And then you start to turn into something else that wasn't really fundamentally you to begin with. So that's why for me as a storyteller, it just made complete sense to tackle this from that perspective, right? I'm not building a fintech company. I'm not like a tech founder, but I am a storyteller and I can completely show the other side of the coin, which is women are crushing it. Women are confident. Women have money. They have these things and they're capable of doing so many things. Why are we so obsessed with talking about what women can't do? Let's talk about what they are doing and see that abundance fuel itself when you change the narrative that's going on up here.
Yeah, I love it. And you do such a good job of not like, let's see what they are doing. You highlight, no, here are the people that are doing it and look at what they're doing. And one of the things that came to mind when you said that, and I've, been involved in women's groups and financial services forever. And one of the things that we often said was, this was kind of a going thing, that try to channel 8-year-old you or 7-year-old you before you started believing those things that were kind of always just put in front of you. And that's the type of person you have to bring back out, bring her back to the surface again.
That's exactly, you've synthesized exactly my point very well.
So this is a good transition just to say, look, you kind of have talked a little bit about your journey, your storytelling, what's important, what's inhibiting us. And then you wrote Fintech is Femme and you launched this new event platform. Talk a little bit about that mission and how you've evolved from kind of establishing and creating these huge platform to writing a book to now having an event, now scaling your event, and that platform as your way of amplifying and driving change in the industry.
Yeah, I would say it goes back to the part where I worked in a traditional media landscape. I worked in traditional media rooms and newsrooms. I saw the gap that was wide open and completely available that seemingly no one wanted to tackle, despite my efforts to say, hey, we should really be talking about this. Hey, this is important. We should put this front page news and make sure we're continuing to cover it. All those ideas being shut down. I remember asking myself, okay, well, how many more years am I going to give, an institution that doesn't fundamentally see what I see? Or why not me go tackle it myself? Why not go make my own publication? Why not go be the entrepreneur or the publisher that I wish I was working for? It could be me. So let's go do that. And with the rise of the creator economy and internet and everything, it just made sense. So about in November 2021, I quit my 9-to-5 and quit the path I was on as a traditional reporter and editor in different B2B publications and said, I'm going to start Fintech is Femme. And it started as a newsletter. It grew to 50,000 subscribers in less than a year. And I write that newsletter twice a week, every week, and 50% of the audience opens it up every week. So it's a pretty intimate conversation I'm having within the newsletter and being in people's most precious place, which is your inbox. It's even more intimate than anything you're going to do on social media, right? Because I have a direct line to connecting with those 50,000 people. As it continues to evolve, it made sense for me to bring those people out of the newsletter and into a community in person, right? Because for me, there's nothing more powerful than when a group of people come together to make change happen. Any type of change that has ever happened, even just looking back at the history of women, right? The suffrage movement, right? Any of those historical moments in our time, they happened because a small group of women decided, you know what, we're going to do something different here and start a movement. And that's how change happens. It doesn't happen overnight, right? Success doesn't happen overnight. It happens from the day-to-day work that you do and the incremental changes that you make every single day and the movement you create by communing, by gathering more people to be a part of your beliefs. And if the only way to do that is by putting yourself out there, right? So I have to go through the motions of the complete fear of sending a newsletter out twice a week to an audience that's basically larger than like Madison Square Garden, right? Like it's absolutely right. But it's my opinions. It's my take on the news. It's my column. It's terrifying.
It's your humor as well, by the way. Like I have to say your humor goes a long way. And I really appreciate the newsletters because you feel your own personality in it.
Thank you. And people have asked me over the years, what ghostwriter do I have? Who's helping me? No one. The answer is nobody. I have help in other capacities, right? But when it comes to the newsletter, I've kept that very, very close and very, very precious. And every single word, typo, mistake, or sense of humor or video, everything that you read in that newsletter is coming directly from me. Every recommendation, everything. I keep that close and no one else. I don't really plan on having anyone else touch that for some time. The evolution for the events and then a community, a private community and all of the things and the podcasts, it's just creating more opportunity for that visibility, right? It's my way of filling that gap of women are 50% of the population, but only a quarter of the news stories read, heard, seen in the media. So this is my way of continuing that. And then of course, making sure that we're adding educational moments and in-person moments, because that's just the natural evolution and cycle to make that change happen.
So a huge part of this audience that's listening to this podcast are working their tails off to build a platform. And they are trying and experimenting all kinds of things. And their demographic they are looking to attract more than any other, because of all the things we said at the top, is women. Now you, I would say, have done a brilliant job at that. You have built your platform. You started there. You started by getting the people to pay you attention. And you've done it with this hard to gather demographic and you've kept them. Can you offer a couple of insights and tips to people who are like, God, how did she do it?
Yeah, of course. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So I would say first and foremost is, when I started Fintech as Femme, it was a Google Doc filled with all of the things I wish I had seen or would read about in a newsletter, right? Or things that I wish I could write about, or, and not putting myself in any box, right? Because that's kind of what the world wants to do, is put in. Instead, I said, you know what? Why shouldn't I be able to write about the intersection of women and gender equity and finance and business and find that sweet spot? So I would say one of the biggest tips you can do is taking the pieces of you as a human and the dimensions that you have and reflecting and figuring out how you create a North Star from that in terms of the narrative and the content that you want to put out there. So writing out all of the things that matter to me, right? And putting it in a list and then kind of creating a narrative structure through that. If it feels like, how am I ever going to find someone that cares about these top 4 things that I care about? Well, guess what? There's a lot of people out there. You're going to find them. If you keep at that at a consistent clip, right? And you'll hear any content creator or writer or storyteller say this, like pick a medium. If it's podcast, it's podcast. If it's a newsletter, it's a newsletter. Writing, whatever it is. I'm a writer, so I went there first before I started doing everything else like podcasts and events and public speaking. Stick to that. Pick a consistent schedule, right? I write a newsletter every Tuesday and Thursday. My whole world is shaped around that deadline, but that's the level of dedication that it takes to get that audience. And then I would say a lot of it is honestly is honesty. I think maybe a year ago or so, there was a lot of talk around authenticity. Authenticity is easier said than done.
What if financial planning wasn't just about numbers, but about you, your values, your goals, your vision for the future? Nomi is transforming client discovery for wealth managers, going beyond assets and risk scores to uncover what truly matters. With behavioral insights and real-time data, Nomi helps advisors personalize advice, build deeper connections, and grow their businesses. Because the best financial decisions start with knowing you. Discover the future of client engagement at nomi.com.
I would say if authenticity is like, you're like, I'm tired of hearing that buzzword, it's not really clicking.
Noting that again for our audience, authenticity is easier said than done. So a lot of financial advisors, I think, are looking to put a veneer, and the veneer is not going to cut it, guys.
No. And I've had a veneer. I've had that. I've had like versions of that, and it takes time. It's going to take some time to consistently put your thoughts out there publicly and find a way to do that feels like you. That is not easy. That only happens through, it's like working out, right? It's like anything. You gotta just keep at it and keep trying and changing and evolving with yourself. So I'm going to throw authenticity out the window and actually think more along the lines of relatability. And you know what's relatable? Someone going in their newsletter and saying, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, my newsletter is 30 minutes late, guys. I was sick, or I had a doctor's appointment run too late, or life happened, or sorry, there's going to be typos in this thing because I'm not a mom, but like I'm a mom, or I have kids, or I'm just juggling a million things. That people want comfort. They want to be comforted by your content. They want to see that you make them feel seen. And that's how you get the audience that you're looking for, right? And honestly, the best way you're going to be able to attract them is you have to be your audience, right? So,
which means being human and sometimes flawed, and not, everything that you think is like polished and perfect.
Nobody wants that anymore. Like, there is a time for the polished, perfect content. That is not, I think, especially if you're a financial planner or advisor, one of my dear former beats as a reporter, being honest and being real is the best thing you can do. It's going to be the hardest thing to get there. And the only way to get there is by trying and going and doing it scared and just saying, you know what, I'm going to do my best to put this out there. But talk about your kids. Talk about that show you went to last week and how great it was and how it inspired you.
Yes. And if you need models, I think read your newsletter.
Oh yeah, there you go. Or just read my newsletter, right? Like I've been at dinners before because my newsletter goes out at 8 p.m. Where like I'm at the dinner and then people at the dinner are like, oh, it's 8. Let me pull up my phone, and like they'll look at my newsletter in front of me and I'm like, yay. And sometimes, because I'll have to read it later, obviously, because they're at dinner, but they'll just scroll down to what I call a consumer section. And it's treating my audience like the consumers that they are, even though they're business people, and this is a business newsletter. And it's, you'll remember it. It's the section of my newsletter where I share like my latest kind of food find. So that's usually like a restaurant I went to, or I'm traveling and bookmark this, or it's something, a new show that I've seen, or what I'm watching right now, or those human elements. I know it feels very like influencer and no one likes that. And that's like an icky word, but it's not about influence. It's not about that. It's about relatability.
Yeah. I think a lot of people listening are like, I do want that influencer. I want to know what is the trick? And I think that consumer section, that relatability, that's brilliant. So 2 more questions. One is you do so much in terms of modeling. So if there's women who are younger, who are earlier in their career, who are listening to this and they're navigating financial realities and tech and where they want to go with their career and put their attention, what would be your advice, given like what you've seen and how many people you've spoken to and the platform that you've developed? How do you help them seize the power and the opportunity that you want them to embrace and become?
One of my mentors very early on, and one of the first women I've ever had on my podcast and profiled in my book, her name is Lule Demese. She is former president of Ally Invest, former CEO of eToro US. So obviously massive feats there. But she told me to always be closest to the fire. If you're like trying to figure out where you want to go next, you want to be at a place where you feel like you're constantly being educated, you're constantly being introduced to something new, right? Maybe it's this, great new thing that you want to explore. Why not chase that and chase that curiosity, right? Even as a journalist and a storyteller, one of the first things you learn in journalism school is, well, the quote is like, follow the money, which really is just follow that curiosity, follow where the money trail is leading you, not being afraid to go down that route and maybe not choose the easy conventional path. To get there, I would say it's really, really great to be surrounded by people who inspire you. So a lot of the women in my book are now, I call them mentors. I never like went up to them and was like, hey, Lule, will you be my mentor one day? That was a relationship built over time, right? I met her. I interviewed her as a reporter when she was a president at Ally Invest, just using her as one of the examples. And I just kept up with her. I followed her on LinkedIn. I liked her posts. I engaged with her work. I made sure to follow up and send her notes just saying, hey, like, love the work you're doing. Congrats. I just created a relationship. And before I know it, she's inviting me to brunch where, hanging out at her house. I'm hosting events at her house, right? Where she's profiled in my book. And now I have this direct access to someone who has kind of lived this long career in financial services and is able to really be the blueprint for someone like me, right? To follow back to that blueprint, back to like looking at the women before you and letting them lead you. Let people lead you and let it be people that you see yourself in, and never think that, especially as a younger woman, never think that you're just taking, because all of the women that now, mentor me, they always tell me how they learn so much from me just as much as I learn from them. So it's a very mutually beneficial and reinforcing relationship. And those happen by way of continuing to build incrementally, right? Those relationships with women that you aspire to be like, and that say things that resonate you and make you feel seen, right? There's nothing more powerful than feeling seen. Follow that, right? Follow that curiosity, that fire, that feeling of being seen, and create an environment around you where there's women that are helping you get there and lead the way.
I love that. There's one thing that I also often say to a lot of women I talk to, which is like, lean into the value that you have to deliver. They've got so much to give. And you think about our industries, both financial services and tech, and man, they are ripe for disruption. If only we had somebody younger to help us understand that generation. Oh, you are that. That is powerful. Like, use that value. And so that's huge. One last question on the podcast, but I'm happy to let you add on if you wanted to.
Yeah. I mean, I would say I agree with that. I think as young people, there's a lot more, you're right, Marla, there's a lot more power that we have, and you should be wield your youthful power a bit more strongly. There's nothing, I get it a lot, right? People are always, they're surprised at how young I am, or shocked to see me and see how young I am. For full disclosure, I'm 30 years old, and they're like, whoa, so accomplished or whatever. Sometimes I'm like, I wish I was more accomplished even younger. But the point though is that wield that youth and that knowledge, because right now to your point, there's so much opportunity in being able to show, let's say you want to be a part of an older institution, or even if it is a startup, but exactly, you have a lot of cards to show and to hold on to, because you fundamentally understand an entire generation that a lot of people are after, right? So don't, play a little poker with that. That's worth a lot. And that's something I've had to learn as, a young person growing in my career too, is that I do hold the keys to something incredibly valuable, and people should see it that way. And it shouldn't matter how young I am, and it shouldn't matter like anything like that. It should be about me understanding that when you hold something valuable, people should respect that and see it like that. But they're only going to do that if you see it and respect it first. So
quick detour before the last question based off of that. So one of the things that Nomi is all about, Nomi is about discovery. And a huge part of the Nomi philosophy is when you think about coming into your power, into the money that the power that you wield through your financial decisions, the most important step to take is understanding you. How are you discovering yourself such that you can then step into your power and hold your money accountable to what change you want it to create, what impact you want it to have? So as you think about this last bit of advice and saying, no, I understand my value, I understand who I am, do you have any thoughts about just the importance of self-discovery and that process of self-discovery toward understanding, no, I get who I am, I get my purpose, and now it's time for me to activate it?
Yeah. Oh gosh. I mean, I can be almost obsessed with the self-discovery element. It might just be me being, like a writer, and I'm always reading, new material, looking at new authors, looking at how other people kind of shape their perspectives around the world, because it's inspiring, right? But I think something about entrepreneurship is that it's the greatest mirror. It's like a moment that honestly, if you wanted self-discovery, go down that path, because you'll have no choice. It'll just throw up right at you, and the end, right? Like you're gonna go on the self-discovery roller coaster, and it's gonna be like, and that's entrepreneurship. For me, it was actually the biggest thing that helped me with my versions of money trauma. So my first go at entrepreneurship, my first company I've ever founded. So I had to experience how it felt to not have a paycheck come in every 2 weeks, right? And had to really reckon with that. Why does that matter so much to me? Why do I need to have that security? Why do I think why do I think a salary is safer than creating my own money and generating my own wealth and eat what you kill mentality, if you will, of entrepreneurship. I had to completely change that mindset of what that actually is or means or looks like to me. And I think that's a really important part of entrepreneurship, of self-discovery. Is one of the best things to do is, first address those money traumas. And if you obviously go to therapy, but if you don't go to therapy, you can also do what I do, which is just taking a moment to really reflect on your past, right? Like really reflect on, one of the best things I was ever told was to think of my first memory of money, right? Like, what's the first memory of money I might have ever had? And that really just as a kid, and that really opens up a lot of doors for why I might feel a certain way. But I would say, like I said, abundance creates abundance. And that's something mentally that I've learned, that if you start to really picture the reality that you want, and you picture the zeros in your bank account, and you picture that deal coming through in that moment, it can happen. And I've had those moments where it has, and those have helped fundamentally change the way that I see money and my self-worth and all of that good stuff. So definitely go down the rabbit hole of self-discovery. And if you really want to do it on the accelerator route, found a company.
That was such a beautiful answer in so many ways. I'm so glad I asked, because that is really like the core of what I think brings people into their power, into their own, is this. So you might have just answered the last question that we always ask. So what is the one instance in your life or conversation that you had that totally changed your relationship with money?
Ooh, so I'll give you a real example of what I just shared when it comes to the abundance. So I found as an entrepreneur, when you'll probably resonate with this, Marla, when I change my rates or my value or retrofit it to fit a deal that's maybe smaller than something I would typically do, just to have the feeling of like, yes, I got something. Those are always the moments where I get the least amount of money and I have to do the most effort and the most work, and they're always the worst deals. On the other side, when you start to actually treat yourself in a version of wealth that you want to see, it can really come back to you. The example I have is actually last year at Money 2020, I had a partner, like a fintech company that wanted to work with me. And a lot of fintech companies work with me to host events or curate content and build community around them. And Fintech is Femme. So this company wanted kind of not the best deal. I wasn't going to make the kind of money that I typically make. Like I was retrofitting my rates to make it happen just cause. And I thought, it's fine. It'll work out. Like a week before the event, or a couple weeks before the event, they pulled out. And I had a guest list of over 100 people and no venue, because my partner just pulled out. And it's like a couple weeks to Money 2020, and you've been there, you know how crazy that event is. And so I ended up having to kind of look at my partner and say, you know what, forget it. We're going to do this our way. I booked a penthouse suite at the Bellagio, which is gorgeous, by the way. Decided to host my event there. Just said, forget it. I'm going to spend the money and have this beautiful suite and invest in my community and put that abundance out there and bring those 100 people into this suite for us to have this moment. And I got to experience a penthouse suite in Vegas, which I've never done before because I did not grow up doing that kind of thing. So, I was in the bathrobe. There's 2 balconies. There's a sauna in this penthouse suite, right? I'm letting myself feel that moment of wealthy, because you know what? Forget it. I'm investing in myself and my community. I woke up the next morning and I get an email from a grant program that I had applied to saying that I was one of the winners and one of the recipients of the grant program.
Amazing.
Yes. So after I had kind of spent and made a little investment in building for my community, it's the next morning I got an email that funneled it right back to me, and it wasn't a small piece of money. It was it was a decent piece of money, the grant. So that really was the moment for me that was ho, got it. So when I treat myself and have that wealthy mindset and treat myself in the way that I know I deserve to be treated, it can really physically and through money, come right back. And honestly, I've never retrofitted and made myself smaller for anyone else ever since.
What a fabulous, fabulous answer. Karma. I love it. This has been such an inspiring conversation. We went way over our general podcast length, but I'm so grateful to you. Thank you for sharing your journey, your insights, your commitment. You are doing so much toward building an inclusive and equitable fintech industry and financial future for so many. So as we talked about today, women aren't just shaping their own financial futures, they're transforming our industry and influencing policy and driving innovation that benefits everyone. There's still so much work to do. Financial inclusion, confidence, and empowerment doesn't happen by accident. They happen when we create spaces like Nicole is doing that amplify diverse voices and challenge our status quo to drive the change we want to see. So if today's conversation resonated with you, take a moment and reflect. How are you using your financial knowledge, your leadership, your influence to empower others? Nicole, really quick, where can listeners follow up on your work and get involved in Fintech is Femme or in the upcoming conferences?
Yes, feel free to check out fintechisfemme.co. Not to be mistaken for .com. Fintechisfemme.co is my website. You can sign up for the newsletter there. She is free, always will be. And also through there, you can check out our events like the Leadership Summit happening April 23rd in New York City. And you can also buy my book through my website, but she's also on Amazon and anywhere you get books. Yeah. That's about it. And also I've been told I'm a prolific LinkedIn poster once, so you can find me on there too.
Fantastic. And for our listeners, what's one way that you can better serve women that you want to support, that you want as your clients, that you want to create the type of world you want to be in? Drop your thoughts in the comments or DM me. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you, Marla, for having me.
Thank you for joining us on the Knowing Me, Knowing You podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Your support helps us bring more transformative conversations to you. Until next time, keep discovering, keep growing, and remember, you're in control of your own financial story. Follow us for more conversations on financial confidence, self-discovery, and the future of money.